Hello everyone, welcome back to another Grimgar video. Today we're going to talk about the other classes of Grimgar that the writer kind of just has, but doesn't really go that much into. These classes are barely mentioned or talked about in the light novel. One of them specifically feels like there should be a lot more to them, because one of these classes is a Necromancer, and Satora, one of Haruhiro's new party members that he gets later on, is a Necromancer. But unfortunately, don't really give her much else to work with other than a golem that gets destroyed at one of the volumes. And that's about it. I'll go into other details about some of the things that these classes can do, but I'm going to be theorizing on a lot of stuff in this video. So expect me to be using this little sign quite a lot, unfortunately. Before we begin, please subscribe, hit the like button, share, let me know in the comments what you guys think of these classes. Or I would say they're less classes and more just kind of like brief mentions. But let's go anyway. The first on this list is the one that really, I feel like, had the biggest ball dropped in the story, Necromancers. In Volume 9, we were introduced to a group of people that are Necromancers. Necromancers were mentioned earlier in the Volume 4 with one of the characters that was in Soma's party, but they didn't really get into too much detail what the Necromancers can do until Volume 9, 10, and 11. Necromancers come from the Hidden Village, and they're essentially outsiders even in that village. And in that village, Satora, the main Necromancer we follow through the story, is even an outsider in her own fucking family. It is unknown if other groups study necromancy, but essentially necromancers use this little sphere that essentially is considered a relic that powers up undead bodies. Take different parts of corpses and you sew together a corpse golem. These golems can actually be quite powerful, especially with the relic powering it up. Most necromancers make multiple undead golems and they use them as like essentially frontline fodder or tanks. Satora, the main necromancer we follow throughout the story, has one golem, and she loves this golem like an actual friend. It doesn't last very long, unfortunately, because this golem ends up fighting a dragon and gets ripped in half, but she does actually retain the power source of her golem. And as far as I'm aware, she still has it to this day. And in terms of what the Necromancer class can do, that's about it. We know that Satora specifically has been training in all forms of martial arts as well, but we don't know if that necessarily has to do with her class or if that's to do with her hyper-focusing on different avenues of combat and just learning them because she wanted to. Satora has been heavily implied to be neurodivergent through the story, and her having extreme hyper-focuses on different combat avenues is something that she didn't mention early on. She even mentioned that it's not something that is essentially forced on her. She just kind of wanted to learn it because she thought it was interesting. She also has a huge fixation with her own golem, and this is one of the reasons why she doesn't make more, because she cares about this one golem so much. Next, we're talking about shamans, and shamans can only be learned, funny enough, is in the elves' shadow forest. Any elf that is talented with spells will actually learn from 6 different schools of magic, and they eventually become a shaman. Shamans are actually heavily implied to be really good healers. It is implied through the narrative that shamans are essentially the Grimgar equivalent to druids, essentially, because they seem to say that they use some form of nature magic. So I don't know if they use stuff like special elementals like the mages do, but from what I do know is that you can actually use multiple different forms of magic as a shaman. You do not need to just be an elf to actually become a shaman. Shima, a human, becomes a shaman because they showed how talented they were with their magic and impressed the elves. And I would also assume this applies to any other class you go into the Shadow Forest to learn. So you could technically learn any class as a human, as far as I'm aware, in the Shadow Forest if you are able to show how talented you are with that class. The next class we're going to talk about is Sword Dancer. Just like shamans, you can only learn to be a sword dancer in the Shadow Forest by elves. Anyone with high skills with swords can learn from 7 different schools of swords. Holy shit. I would assume this class is a serious DPS class, because they essentially teach you 7 different forms of combat. That's literally all we know about that class. But judging by the name of the class, I'm assuming you're a really fast class with a lot of damage. At the very least, I'm guessing this class will also swing around 2 swords at once. And due to the fact that you're learning from so many different schools of swordsmanship, I'm assuming you can use different types of swords. Short sword, long swords, broadswords, just all types of swords. I'm assuming, at least, because we realistically know nothing about this class. Next, we're going to talk about probably my favorite of these classes that we're talking about, and should have way more to talk about, the Samurai class. Soma is the only canonically known samurai that we know of in the light novel. You can, however, argue that characters like Takagashi are also samurais. And to an extent, Ranta was taught by Takagashi, and he did learn some swordsmanship from him. So you could. So if you want to get really, you know, hair splitting here, Ranta's kind of a Dread Knight multi-class samurai. I kind of like that. Let's go with that. Let's go with that headcanon. I really like that a lot, actually. But samurais essentially can only be learned in the hidden village. You have to have extremely high levels of skill, even have a chance at becoming a samurai. You have to impress the village so much. Soma is the only one that is canonically known to have actually done this in the story. And before that, it's presumed that he was a warrior, and he himself says he's still considered a tank. So samurais can essentially still be considered tanks, I guess. They usually wield katanas, even though technically using katanas is not something that is exclusive to samurais. We see characters like Yume and Kuzaku also use katanas, but hey, you gotta give the samurai something, I guess. We also see characters like Soma dual-wield katanas and straight up go toe-to-toe with a fucking Hydra. So, you know, there's that. And the next class we're gonna talk about is the Archer, which is the most obvious to describe class out of all of them. And again, you need to learn this class in the Shadow Forest by the elves. Like the other classes, it's assumed that if you show how skilled you are with a bow, primarily if you're like a hunter or something, the elves in the Shadow Forest will accept you into the Archer class. Then you can learn from the 5 different bow schools, goddamn, and learn new forms of archery. These classes sound very powerful, but I wish there was more to them. The Archer class is essentially, I would not say the Archer class is a direct upgrade to the Hunter class, because the Hunter class brings stuff like survivability, tracking, knowing nature, stuff like that. But the Archer class seems to specifically just focus on archery. So if you're a Hunter and then, you know, say multi-class into an Archer class, you can just upgrade all of your archery levels. All I'm saying, it's pretty fucking powerful. Or at least it seems super powerful because you're learning from 5 different schools of archery. And yes, that is all that we know about the Archer class, honestly. And the very, very last class that we're going to talk about is actually one that I'm not even sure humans can learn in Grimgar. I'm not 100% on this one. But orc sorcerers are very annoying, and they're introduced in Volume 3. These motherfuckers can just cause pure chaos. They can shoot fireballs, bugs, debuff. It's assumed they can fly, apparently. And judging by the way they run around in the battlefield, they're actually decently fast. Hadahiro and Ranta had a fucking time trying to kill these guys, and they were a nuisance. The light novel describes them as being the orcs' equivalent to mages. So whether or not they're actually using their own form of elementals is unknown. But those are all the classes in Grimgar that are not talked about enough at all in the light novel. Give us more! Let me know what you guys thought of this video in the comments down below. Let me know which class do you think was fumbled the most when it comes to information. Granted, I guess the writer doesn't want to go into these classes because he has no interest in them, because they themselves do not have, like, huge impact on the story, so I guess going into them wouldn't really make that much of a difference. But it's just a level of curiosity. I want to know what else they can do, you know what I mean? It could be the D&D player in my brain, but still, it's like there's so much more to these classes that I want to know about, and they just don't go into them. But it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Please don't forget to check out my Twitch and my gaming YouTube, link in the description. Recently, we've been playing a lot of turn-based RPGs. We've been playing a lot of Solasta. We will be playing Baldur's Gate this summer, so expect a lot of D&D video games. Thanks for watching. Bye!